Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It is November 23rd. Little late start this morning, but we've got some great topics: NFL, college football, and more. Check it out. Let's rock and roll.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It's November 23rd. I am your host, Craig Campbell. Rolled solo again this morning. Ray Cruz not able to join. So it's we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun and talk some sports this morning. But hit me up in the comments here and let us know. Let me know what your takes are on the biggest topics in sports. We're not going to have a show Thursday or Friday the rest of the week. Today's going to be our Friday. We're going to take Thanksgiving. We're going to enjoy it with our families. We hope you will as well. So happy Thanksgiving Eve. If you're traveling, be safe. It's been wild out there. So, but let's get in it. Let's talk a little bit about the social media platforms for ASAP, especially ASAP in the morning. You can find ASAP on all the different networking platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. We're also live this morning on Roku, Tiki Live, and I forget the last one. Excuse me. Roku, Tiki Live, Apple TV. There's another one. But this is where we're at today. Oh boy. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. Hope you're having a great day. Let's talk some NFL, shall we? Let's just get into this. This is going to be a lot of fun. All right, so Thursday. Man, I'm sorry. I have a hard time clearing my throat right now. Oh, there we go. So like we said, today, we're not going to be doing a show tomorrow. Tomorrow, Thanksgiving morning, we got 3 games on the NFL slate that they'll have. It's going to be football all day tomorrow. It's going to be fantastic coverage of NFL. First game we're going to look at Buffalo and Detroit. Buffalo, Detroit at 12:30 on CBS. Buffalo coming off of a kind of an interesting start. They're sitting at 7-3 right now. Detroit coming off a 3-game win streak. Buffalo's been a team where they had to rally back, beat Cleveland, and they did it on the road because obviously they had a home game slated, but they got 6 feet of snow in Buffalo. They had to relocate to Detroit, and they played essentially a home game. They still traveled back home, even though they're coming back to Detroit. So this game tomorrow, it's got a little bit more intrigue now than it did a couple weeks ago. Detroit on a 3-game win streak, surprisingly beating the New York Giants on the road, and dominated by the run game, the defense. They bottled up Saquon Barkley, and they essentially forced Daniel Jones to beat them with their with his arm, and not allow the run game to dominate. So what I look at with this, does Detroit really have a shot? It's a slim shot because they're on a 3-game win streak, because their run game has been surprisingly, their offense the run game's been surprisingly effective even without DeAndre Swift. And I say without DeAndre Swift because, yes, I know he's been playing. It's been Jamal Williams as the starting running back. Jamal Williams, I think, fits this offense better than DeAndre Swift. they've been utilizing him much more than just a goal line back, with DeAndre Swift having been hurt for part of the season. That's always been the knock on DeAndre Swift. And if you're not available, you can't be effective, right? And DeAndre Swift, having his multiple injuries that he's had, now the Lions, they're now taking the reins and giving it to Jamal Williams at running back. He's been the dominant ball carrier. He's got essentially 3 times as many carries as Swift throughout the season. He's closing in. He's actually closing in on 700 yards. He's already got 12 touchdowns on the year, tied lead for the NFL. And then Justin Jackson was brought in partway through the season. Justin Jackson's starting to get more carries as each week progresses. So now it's become a true running back by committee backfield. Williams, Swift, Jackson's getting more carries. So now DeAndre Swift, it's smart on the side of Detroit. It's smart by Dan Campbell to limit DeAndre Swift to keep him healthy. And now we're finally starting to see a few of those players actually step up, Jamal Williams and Justin Jackson, in that backfield, to now allow DeAndre Swift to kind of sit and be healthy. And then in turn, hopefully he can be more effective. But does Detroit actually have a chance in this game? It's really tough to say. That defense has been so bad. It is dead last in the NFL in overall defense, second to last in rush defense, and 28th in the league in pass defense. That does not bode well against a high-flying Bills offense that's been averaging over 400 yards a game, almost 300 passing yards a game, and 134 rushing yards per game. I think the only thing that's really going to help Detroit in this scenario is if they can essentially pull off what they did last week against the New York Giants. If they can have a successful pass rush, if Aiden Hutchinson and company can create pressure, they don't necessarily have to record a ton of sacks. We saw that in the Monday night game with San Francisco getting in the backfield. They didn't record a ton of sacks, but if the Lions pass rush can get into the backfield and generate some pressure, then they may have a chance. But the problem is you have to sustain that for 4 quarters. And that's something that the Lions defense up until last week has not shown the ability to do. So I think right now it's 9.5 is the spread. I think Buffalo covers, just because even though Detroit has been hot the last couple weeks, the road to the playoffs is still there for them. You know, I wasn't banging my chest at the beginning of the season, but I figured with how easy this schedule is, how potentially down the NFC North could be, and just how that schedule laid out for the Lions, they could still win 7 to 8 games, and we're well on track for that. So that a loss this weekend isn't going to derail their playoff chances because it's against Buffalo, one of the better teams in the AFC. So Buffalo's a 9.5 point favorite. I foresee this kind of getting out of hand quickly. Lions could make a push, as they usually do in the second half, but I don't think going to really make much of a difference, to be honest with you. So the Lions do have a slim chance, I think, but it's not. It is just that it's slim. All right, if I can get this thing to work. Sorry, I'm putting up banners. And so this is what happens when you're on the show solo and there's nobody else here. We're we're doing everything we can. And I spelled it wrong. All right. Sorry about that. 4:30. We've got the OBJ Bowl. The New York Giants coming fresh off a loss against the Lions. See, Damien, this is actually, we agree here. I also had stated that I think the Lions, if they got lucky, could make the playoffs as a wild card. I didn't have that as my expectation. They got 4 wins this year. They had 3 wins last year. I had stated on every platform, every interview that I've had, that if the Lions were to double up their win total from 3 to 6, that would be a successful season. I think that would be a successful season. And they're well on that track right now. So if you can get 6, 7 wins, you're on a good pace because you still have a very young team. Now you got Jameson Williams coming back, your number 1 wide receiver, your first round wide receiver draft pick. The Lions are essentially playing, in my opinion, the Lions are playing with house money now. Because you just came off a big win against a team who's had a really hot start to the season in the New York Giants. You're on a 3-game win streak, the first time you had a 3-game win streak in 5 years. And you're getting guys healthier by the week that have been out for the entirety of the season, i.e. Jameson Williams. If you add Jameson Williams to this offense that already has Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark played for the first time in a number of weeks last week. You've got DeAndre Swift, who's moderately healthy. I don't think he's ever going to actually be fully healthy. I don't think DeAndre Swift's ever going to be actually fully healthy. But if we look at the remaining schedule for the Lions, it's pretty favorable. Not favorable as in they're going to win out favorable. But after Buffalo, you've got Jacksonville. Jacksonville has been their own. They're also kind of on the same track, in my opinion, as the Lions, to where they're still trying to rebuild. They're still trying to retool. You've got Doug Peterson, now finally a competent coach in Jacksonville to work with that young team. Jacksonville has some bright spots. Top 10 in rushing, top 10 in overall statistical ranking on offense. They have a top 10 rush defense. But Jacksonville is a beatable team. Jacksonville is a very beatable team if you're Detroit. Then you got Minnesota. You were legitimately 1 play away from beating Minnesota on the road earlier this year. The way Minnesota's playing right now, I don't know. I think it's probably going to be a lot like their first meeting. If the Lions can pull off an upset in this game, I think that's a huge win. Not the biggest win of Dan Campbell's career. That happened a couple weeks ago in Chicago. And you wonder why Chicago? Chicago's not good either. Because it was a road win. that was one of the biggest wins of Dan Campbell's career because it was on the road, which is something that the Lions haven't been able to consistently do in over 20 years. And the fact that Dan Campbell finally got a win on the road. It's been a long time coming. So then he gets back to back. But you got 3 home games now for the next 3 weeks. Buffalo, Jacksonville, Minnesota. You got to beat Jacksonville. If you're the Lions, you have to beat Jacksonville. The other 2 games, if you can keep it competitive, you can still keep the fan base engaged. And then you got 2 road games against the Jets and Carolina. I wouldn't call the Jets a must-win game on the road, but the opportunity is there. If the Jets continue to show more dysfunction, like they have over the last week or 2, they continue to show more dysfunction, the Lions can win that game. The Lions can win that game. Carolina's making another switch at quarterback. They're going back to Sam Darnold. They're in a really rough spot. I think that's another potential win. That's another potential win on the road. That's Christmas Eve. And then your last 2 games are division games against Chicago and Green Bay. This ultimately depends on what is Chicago going to do with Justin Fields. Is Justin Fields going to sit to rehab his shoulder? Because I guess he has been reportedly playing with a dislocated shoulder, which is extremely painful, by the way. So if they bench Justin Fields, that's a win. If they bench Justin Fields, that's a win for Detroit at home against Chicago in week 17. And then finally against Green Bay on the road. Now, the fact that they beat Green Bay 15-9 a couple weeks ago to start this 3-game win streak, I think a lot of this is also going to depend on where is Green Bay the last week of the season. So Green Bay, right now, we know they're sitting at 4-7. They're 3rd in the NFC North, but their remaining games, Philadelphia, Chicago, the Rams, Dolphins, Minnesota, and then the Lions. I think the games they can win, they can beat Chicago, they can beat the Rams, and that's about it. They lost to Minnesota early in the year, and I think Minnesota can handle them again. But of your remaining 6 games, you've got maybe 2 wins. You got Miami. I don't think that's a win. That's going to be a loss on the road. Philadelphia this weekend, that's a loss on the road. So you could be looking at a 6-win team, in Green Bay going into the final week of the season, whereas the Lions would likely be a 7, maybe 8-win team, dare I say. But I think a lot of it depends on these other teams and kind of where are they situating. That's a game that the Lions have historically had a tough time to win on the road at Lambeau. But this is a different Lions team that we're talking about here that actually beat Green Bay in Lambeau last year. So, could the Lions make the wild card? Absolutely. Am I expecting it? No. If they get 2 more wins the rest of the way and hit that 6-win mark, 6-win, 7-win mark, I'd have to be pleased. Now, at the end of the season, of course, we as fans are going to want our teams to perform perfectly every single week. That's not going to happen. So, Damian, I'm not against you. You know, I've stood here sat here on this show and said that the Lions could be anywhere from a 7 to 9 win team. And of course, get mocked and laughed at. But that's the position that they're sitting in right now. Favorable schedule the rest of the way. You've got almost guaranteed losses against Buffalo. Probably, I would say Minnesota, just because how well they've been playing this year. Even though they legitimately had one play from beating Minnesota on the road early in the season. The Jets is kind of a toss-up game right now. And I think Carolina's a win. And the Bears, it depends on if Justin Fields is healthy. If Justin Fields is playing, this game it's a toss-up. Just like the last one that just played 2 weeks ago in Chicago. So I think that's kind of where the Lions are sitting right now in the wild card spot. They do have a chance, and their schedule shows that they could have 8 wins, 7 wins. 9-8 could get you into the wild card. It's cold and dark in the basement, just saying. Yeah, it's cold and dark in the basement. And that's right now where the Bears and the Packers are sitting. That's where they're sitting right now. All right, so let's move on to the second game. The second game in Thanksgiving, excuse me, on Thanksgiving Day. Giants and Cowboys. The OBJ Bowl essentially is what it's being talked about. This is the battle for Odell Beckham. And both teams coming in at 7-3, tied for second in the NFC East. And with this game being at Dallas, right now Dallas is a 9.5-point favorite. It's kind of tough. I think that's a really good spread because that's tough for me. That's tough for me to gauge. Because not only the Giants played so poorly last week against Detroit, but we know what they're capable of earlier in the season. Saquon Barkley's having himself a phenomenal year. However, I said this on the show yesterday already. Dallas Cowboys are hitting their stride in a way that makes them one of the scarier teams in the NFC. Micah Parsons and that defense playing really well, especially that 40-3 thrashing of the Vikings last weekend. Dallas now finally has found their first running back on the depth chart in Tony Pollard. And I should say they finally made the decision that it's Tony Pollard. There's been a lot of talk in the media over the last couple weeks that Tony Pollard should be the number one guy. And Zeke Elliott is not the same Zeke Elliott that we are used to from seeing in years past. He really hasn't been himself the last year or two. But that's the shelf life of a running back. Running backs don't last terribly long in the NFL, especially playing at such a high level. So Zeke Elliott now has kind of become the second running back. He's become the spell back. If Tony Pollard wants a break, that's when Zeke Elliott sees the field. That's essentially what their rotation is becoming, especially with Zeke out right now. It has been out, I should say. I think the most interesting matchup for this game is going to be, just like last week for the Giants, is can they get Saquon Barkley going? They for whatever reason, and credit to the Lions defense here. Last week, they bottled up Saquon Barkley in a way that he has not been bottled up, at all this year. They lost they lost they lost Wan'Dale Robinson for the year with an ACL injury. You know, you've got I think that's going to be the matchup, because if Barkley can get back on track and the Giants can do what they did a few weeks ago, Dallas's run defense is one of the bottom half. It's in the bottom half of the NFL, 26th in the league. But the last time Dallas and New York played, you had Cooper Rush at quarterback. Dallas was kind of in a state of flux. They were still trying to kind of figure out who they were. And so were the Giants. The Giants at that point, 2-0, made it a close game. These games are always close no matter what. It seems like, especially in division rivals. But I think that's the big matchup for Dallas and New York. Can Saquon Barkley be what he was a few weeks ago? Can they get the run game going? Because when you've got one of the best rushing offenses in the league matched up against one of the worst rushing offenses in the league, but that's going to help make, ideally, Daniel Jones a little bit more effective. Now, the one thing that works big time against the Giants is the fact that how well this Dallas Cowboys defense has been playing the last couple weeks. And you've got to figure out an answer for Micah Parsons. And I don't think that's something that the Giants are going to be able to kind of overcome. The Cowboys right now lead the league in sacks. I think it's 42. I think I saw earlier. They lead the league in sacks, and that does not bode well. If you can we saw what happened with Daniel Jones last week. When they could generate some pressure and play with the lead, the Lions came after him. They had guys that were beating their matchups, getting into the backfield, recorded a few sacks. If Dallas can do that, this game's over. I'm not going to say it's going to be a blowout like this last week's matchup against Minnesota. But I'm not saying that either. I think Dallas ends up covering the 9.5 spread. But I think it could be a fairly close game early. But if the Giants cannot establish the run, it's going to turn into last week against the Lions. So the Giants have to be able to establish the run. They've got to protect Daniel Jones as best as possible. Try to limit the pass rush for the Dallas Cowboys as much as you can. And then from there, you just got to hope for the best. You got to hope for the best. And the last game, if I can get this to work. I got too many damn tabs open. Last game on the docket, kind of a surprising one, because we always see Detroit playing on Thanksgiving. We always see Dallas playing on Thanksgiving. Recently, we've started to see a third game. We started to see a third game be played on NBC on Thursday night, on Thanksgiving night. And generally, there's a theme that goes with that. You see teams that you normally see on Thanksgiving, but NFC North fans, you get to see a double dose of the NFC North. The Vikings are hosting the New England Patriots at home in Minnesota at 8:20. Minnesota's favored by 2.5. They're probably one of the most intriguing teams right now because of how badly they just got beat by Dallas, by a team that they likely could see in the playoffs. But also, just how just how this season gone for them. They having one loss going into that Dallas game, they look like they were at the top of everybody's power rankings, somewhere between 1 and 3. And they were beating teams. They were beating teams that didn't have starting quarterbacks. They were beating teams that had a plethora of injuries. So a lot were wondering, is this a for real team? Minnesota played an actual team that they might see in the playoffs, and they got absolutely destroyed. So now they play New England. New England coming off that 10-3 defensive battle win against the Jets last weekend. But they're on a 3-game win streak. They've beaten the Jets twice, and they beat the Indianapolis Colts. So now they got Minnesota on the road. And I think one of the biggest factors. Morning, Dre. What's going on, my man? Dre, part of the College Football Breakdown show here on Saturday mornings on the All Sports All Plays Network. Dre's co-host Ray is out today. He's traveling for Thanksgiving holiday, so he won't be back until at least Monday or Tuesday. But they are going to be doing the College Football Breakdown show this Saturday morning, and they're going to be talking a lot about Michigan and Ohio State, a lot of the other big rivalry games that are happening this next weekend. So check that out here on the All Sports All Plays Network on Saturday morning. But New England statistically, it's all about their defense. It's all about their defense. And this is, I think, the biggest matchup to watch for this Thursday night game is going to be, can New England generate a pass rush on Kirk Cousins and essentially do what Dallas did this last weekend? If they can get to Kirk Cousins, this is going to be a much more intriguing game. And a lot of credit to New England, 6-4 so far through 10 games. And coming into this season, they hadn't made a ton of moves. They didn't know what their quarterback situation was going to look like. They had a lot of guys that didn't play over the last couple of years. Now they're kind of getting all those pieces back together. I give them a lot of credit because they're still in the thick. They're still in the thick of the AFC East race. I figured this is kind of where they would top out, 6 to 7 wins this year. They're already, even with as tough a division as they have, they're sitting in a really good position right now. But I think that's something that they need to be able to do, is generate a pass rush, get to Kirk Cousins, because we've seen what happens if you can get to Kirk Cousins. And I think that in and of itself is going to help them out. They got to limit turnovers, of course. I think this is going to be a really under-respected game, but I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch. You got Mac Jones. Mac Jones back in at quarterback. And it's going to be I think it's going to be a good one. But that game's Thursday night at 8:20 on NBC. All right, we're gonna roll through some topics here today. So just hit us up in the comments. Let me know what game you're looking forward to the most for Thanksgiving. Let me know what you're doing for your Thanksgiving plans as well. Well, I'm just gonna be at home. I'm gonna be at home with the family. We're gonna be making some food, watching lots of football. I'm gonna I'm going to make the kids sit down and watch football with me all day, and it's going to be fantastic. Generally, they might watch a little bit with me, but not a ton. But it's it's going to be, it's a tradition that we've kind of started. If I'm not traveling back home to Michigan, we started a little thing here of our own. So, hey, let me know what you're doing for Thanksgiving, for the Thanksgiving holiday. If you're doing some shopping, some Black Friday shopping, I do a lot of mine online. I don't really deal with crowds and stuff that much, so I'm not going to be out and about traveling on Friday for shopping, I should say. I'm likely going to be probably working a little bit, quite a bit. Kids have been all week off school, so I've had to really massively adjust my work schedule accordingly. And it's usually a pretty busy weekend in the casino industry, so I'll probably be working. I'll probably be working. All right, speaking of college football, let's talk a little bit about college football. So the college football that didn't go through. What the heck? Let's talk a little bit of college football in the playoff rankings. Say, there it goes. Hey, there it goes. Oh, goodness gracious. So let's talk a little bit of college football, shall we? Last night, college football playoff rankings came out. This is the fourth rankings that have been released. And let me see if this will work. We're fingers crossed this is going to work. My internet is really not liking this stuff right now. So I'm just hoping and praying that that works. It'll come up in a second. It's really not liking StreamYard right now. But all right, college football playoff rankings, the top 4 stay the same. You got Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU in at the top 4. I think the biggest surprise to me is number 5. LSU, a 9. Look at the rest of this top 10. The top 10, you've got Georgia at 1, LSU at 5, Bama at 7, and Tennessee at 10. You have four SEC teams in the top 10. Bama is a disgrace at number 7. There's no reason why Bama should be that high. No reason why Bama should be that high. LSU at 5 and 9 and 2. This ranking this ranking shows to me the extreme SEC bias that there is in college football. Because what's going to happen is when LSU plays Georgia, they're putting them in the top 5 now, because when those two meet in the SEC championship game, if LSU wins, we know they're going to get in the playoff, but they're ranking them high enough because then Georgia's going to stay in. But they're doing it for the ratings. They're doing it to draw the eyeballs. Oh, it's a top 5 matchup in the SEC championship game. LSU, I don't think should be one of the top 5 teams in the country. And I don't think Bama should be number 7. If anything, USC should be 6. Clemson should be, they're probably good, 7, because LSU, while 5 is too high, I don't think it's too far off. Yes, they got this. They got their teeth kicked in by Tennessee. They had, they got 2 losses. It's not likely you're not going to see a 2-loss team get into the college football playoff unless LSU wins the SEC championship game. But I think you can't have Clemson's only got the 1 loss. Yes, it was a fairly bad loss. Excuse me. Yeah, it was a fairly bad loss against Notre Dame early in November, where they got their teeth kicked in. But they still have an opportunity to make their case for the college football playoff if they can handle their business against South Carolina this weekend, and then in the ACC championship game, against UNC. UNC losing did not help their cause whatsoever. Doesn't help their case whatsoever. Losing against a terrible Georgia Tech team. Yeah, that's a bad loss. That's a really bad loss. That team's 5-6. So for Clemson, their case is they still have an open road to get to the playoff. It's a really hard one, but they still have an open road to get to the playoff. USC, I think, is probably the one team right now that has the likeliest road to get in, because this weekend, Michigan, Ohio State, depending on how this game goes, if this game is a fairly close game in the, scores in the 20s and 30s, and it's a 1-score game all the way throughout, I think you could make the argument that both of those teams could make the playoff. I don't think it's likely, because the winner of that game is likely going to win the Big Ten championship. Because there is no competition. There is no competition in the Big Ten West. There is not. Tennessee is an interesting case, because I think you would have to look at the rest of this rankings and say, okay, if they're not top 10, who's better than them that should be ranked higher? I don't see any team behind them that should be ranked higher than them based on their body of work this season. Penn State, no. Kansas State's a 3-loss team at number 12. That's way too high. That's way too high, because they had lost against a Tulane team earlier this year. Yes, Tulane was ranked. They're still ranked right now. They're top 15, I think. They lost against TCU, top 4 team in the country, beating Oklahoma State, but then losing against Texas. I think I'm very surprised to see Kansas State that high. But I don't think Kansas State's going to get in the top 10. So then keep going down the list. Is Washington better than Tennessee? Hell no. Is a 3-loss Utah team better than Tennessee? Absolutely not. Now you're getting into 3-loss teams, and even at the bottom, you got Texas and Louisville, who are 4-loss teams at the bottom of the top 25. So I think just by default, Tennessee is still a top 10 team. So that, in that regard, I disagree, Damian. I think, yes, it's a really, really bad loss to lose to South Carolina. But if you look at the body of work for the rest of these teams in the college football playoff rankings, there is no team that has a better resume than Tennessee that's ranked 11 or worse. There's no team that's got a better resume. But looking at that top 10, Clemson at number 8, I think that, like I said, I think they should be ranked a little bit higher. I think LSU should be 6, maybe 7. And then Bama should not be 7. They should be down at 8, maybe 9, kind of depending. But Bama's kind of been a byproduct of being able to beat up on nobody teams. Because while Bama last weekend, this is the one thing about the SEC, and I don't know how they're allowed to get away with this. After beating Ole Miss on the road, which is still a big win, they play against Austin Peay. They play against a team that is, those games should be happening at the beginning of the season. I don't see many other conferences actually like doing what the SEC does. Hey, let's schedule a couple of cupcakes early in the season, and then all the second to last week of the season, we're going to schedule our third cupcake of the year. You don't see that. All the other conferences, most of them, they do it all of them at the beginning of the year. But I've said this before on other shows, it's kind of genius. It's a way to cheat the system because now you're like, oh man, Bama, yeah, they got a 34-0 win in November against the team. Against a team like Austin Peay. So I see that and it kind of makes you get a little upset. You know what I mean? But hey, it is what it is. Damien's question, would you say that the way App State has been playing, this season, they should be in the top 10? No, because App State has been a fun little story, right? App State's been a fun little story. I don't see they had their big win, Texas A&M, but they're just the way that their schedule does. If they moved up to a bigger conference, so playing in the Sun Belt compared to where they were a couple of years ago, the program that is, and I know you're doing this out of jest, and I don't think you mean App State, because if you're talking about the same App State team that is 6-5, App State, the only thing that's happened positively for their program this year, they had that close 2-point loss that was a major shootout in the week 1 against UNC. The upset against Texas A&M week 2. And then they had College Game Day week 3. But I don't think you mean that same App State team. I think you're talking about, are you talking about Tulane at 9-2? I think you're talking about a group of 5 team. But I think how this season's shaped up so far, and how this is now the 4th ranking of the season. I think the biggest atrocity right now is LSU at number 5. LSU at number 5, 2-loss team getting put over USC. And it's not because USC's had this really strong schedule. USC's only loss is on the road at Utah, which at the time was 20th in the country. And yes, I now know now we know that Utah, they had they had playoff aspirations. That got dashed already week 1 when they lost to Florida at the Swamp. A team in Florida that wasn't expected to do a ton and still body of work hasn't really looked all that great. But beating UCLA, and now your last week's matchup is against Notre Dame. Notre Dame, which has fought their way back into the top 15. So I think if you take USC and their body of work, they have one ranked loss. But if they can win out, beat Notre Dame, Damien's helping us break in some news this morning. I had to double check on this thing. We'll check on that in just a second. We had somebody to bounce off of, then we could dive into that a little bit. But USC at number 6, 10-1. I think that should be a stronger resume, especially if they make their conference championship game, which LSU technically they are going to make the SEC championship game. But one thing that really hurt LSU, and if LSU had beaten Florida State in week 1, I think LSU is in the top 4. They are over a TCU or they're over just TCU. Because I'm trying to think, they're not going to rank them ahead of Georgia, who's number 1. They're not going to rank them ahead of the 2. They might be number 3 over like a Michigan. But the argument could then be made that they should have a better resume than Ohio State too, because Ohio State, the knock I hear all the time this year on Michigan is that, they didn't play anybody. Neither did Ohio State. Ohio State hadn't played nobody either. So I think if LSU had won week 1 against Florida State, we would be talking about a much different scenario to where there are 2 teams in the SEC, from the SEC in the college football playoff. It's still possible, but now if LSU wins out and beats Georgia, they're automatically in. Georgia's going to be probably number 3, because then you'd have to put the winner of the Big Ten at number 1. LSU would go number 2. And then Georgia would be number 3. And then number 4 would probably be TCU if they win out. But that's the path for LSU, is unfortunately the fact that they got ranked number 5. I think they have to win out. If they don't beat Georgia, they're not in. And if they still get in, they got to fix the playoff, because that's ridiculous. Because if LSU gets the SEC championship game and loses to Georgia, but still makes the playoff, you got to blow up the whole system, because that should not happen. A 3-loss team in the playoff should not happen. But that means that USC's got to take care of business. That means that USC's got to take care of business. That means TCU's got to take care of business. And that means one of either Ohio State or Michigan has to take care of business and win their championship, win their conference championship. They can do that. Then I think that's a possibility. But that's going to be some fun. I guess the last thing we'll touch on here, and then we're about an hour in the show, and we're gonna wrap it up for the weekend. We're gonna take a little bit of an early weekend. Is this coaching NFL college football hot seat and the potential openings that could happen? And really the big one right now is Lane Kiffin. Is Lane Kiffin going to jump from Ole Miss to Auburn? And I want to hear from you guys. Let me know, do you think Lane Kiffin will jump or should jump from Ole Miss to Auburn? I personally don't think he should. We've seen what there are levels to SEC coaching jobs. Ole Miss, what Lane Kiffin has been able to do to help get them back on the map, he's going to have a lot more leeway in Oxford than he will at Auburn. Lane Kiffin's going to have a lot more flexibility at Ole Miss than he would at Auburn. Auburn, take a look at, for Lane Kiffin, what is this really about? Does he really want to play Nick Saban every year? Because that's what would happen. And the hard thing about college football is when you make the move, you've got to get your own players in. You implement your system, you implement all the different stuff you need. So it takes about roughly a year or two to get your team, to get your guys in there, right? So if you do that at Auburn, your expectations go from here at Ole Miss to here at Auburn. You are expected every year at Auburn to be challenging Bama. Now, whether those expectations are warranted or not, you're expected to challenge Bama every single year. That's like if you get I'm not going to compare them apples to apples, but that's like when you get a job at a place like Michigan, Ohio State, Texas, USC. When you get those types of jobs, those are brands that you are expected to challenge for conference championships and to push for the playoff, for national championships. Is Auburn in that same tier? I don't think so, but that's their expectation. Like I said, for right or for wrong, that's their expectation. I think Lane Kiffin, either way, he's going to get paid. I don't think he should make the jump. Likely, and I agree with Devin here, I think Ole Miss is his best fit. He's been hopping around to different places with, mixed success. But I think he finally found a good home in Ole Miss. Don't mess that up. Don't mess that up. He might be using this for leverage to get a bigger payday from Ole Miss, which that's very likely. But I think regardless of what happens, this is a very unique job. Auburn is a very unique job. And if they don't get Lane Kiffin, the other name that has been brought up is Hugh Freeze, which I think is really, really ironic and hilarious. But Hugh Freeze, with all that he's been through, in his first run in the SEC, that would be a very, very interesting pick if Auburn goes that route. Nebraska is one of the other big names, and there's rumors that Matt Rule was offered the job and has turned it down. I think that would be an interesting get for Nebraska. But the hard part is for Nebraska, I think that would be a good fit for the Big Ten West. That'll be a good fit for the Big Ten West. The problem with that is what we've seen out of Matt Rule's Baylor teams I don't think they would play physical enough or be the right style to mix in with the Big Ten contenders. Your Ohio States, your Michigans, your Penn States, and then depending on what Michigan State does, if they get back to where they were a few years ago. But that's the brand of football that wins you championships in the Big Ten. D'Antonio's Michigan State team, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, those are the types of brands, those are the styles that win you Big Ten championships, not what's going on in the Big Ten West. Wisconsin was the closest thing to that. But the way that they ran their offense was so 1980s that once they played a team like an Ohio State, they'd get waxed every time. So, but you can't go all the way wide open and not play a physical brand of football. We've seen how that tried and failed with Scott Frost. We've seen how that went with Rich Rodriguez when he went to Michigan. He tried to bring in and get all fancy and you can't get away from playing physical brand of football in Big Ten. Can Matt Rule bring that? I don't know. But if I'm Matt Rule, I don't want that job. I don't want Nebraska because not only are they, like Devin said, I agree, they're kind of a dumpster fire right now. Nebraska, from their fan base, they're still living in the 1990s. Their expectations are still living in the 1990s. This is like what Michigan fans, and I say this because I am a Michigan fan, and I've seen this happen in the fan base. The expectations were way up here, but the talent of the program was down here. That's where Nebraska is right now in their program. Your talent level doesn't meet the expectations. So you got to lower the expectations so that way you can allow somebody to come in and make their mark on the program. Lance Leopold is probably one of the next big candidates for this job. And I think based on what he's done at Kansas, I think that makes sense for him. He's already recruiting in the area. It's a bigger conference. He'd have a bigger budget, but it has to come in. You got to manage your expectations. Lance Leopold took a Kansas program that is just been in the dumpster for a long time. And he brought them to at least moderate respect, being ranked in the top 25 this year. If Urban Meyer gets another college coaching job, it is damn sure not going to be Nebraska. There's no way. No way. He essentially gets to write his own check if he wants to coach in college football. Not to say that he's a good coach. It's just because of the success he had at Ohio State, and at Utah and Florida. But the thing that I'm hoping that happens with Urban Meyer is that what was brought to light while he was in Jacksonville sticks with him and he doesn't get another job ever as a coach. You don't want somebody like that running your program. You really don't. You don't want somebody with that loose and poor of morals to run your program. Maybe Nebraska's willing to make a huge offer, but Urban Meyer's not going to Nebraska, Damian. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to burst that bubble. But speaking of, we mentioned Wisconsin in the Big Ten, staying in the Big Ten, talking about Wisconsin, I think that's going to be That's going to be an interesting job if they keep their defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard, who's been 4-2 since he replaced Paul Chryst. If he stays in as head coach, they take the interim tag off. Wisconsin's got an uphill battle. Not necessarily in the Big Ten West, but you've just got an uphill battle to get back to where your program was. And I'd be very interested to see how Jim Leonhard recruits and how that, if that team is going to be able to get back to, their Wisconsin expectations, or if they actually take a step forward. And the Big Ten West is always been kind of the lesser of the two divisions in the Big Ten. And I've said this for the last couple of years, and Devin, I completely agree. For the best part of the Big Ten, and this might end up happening when we start getting teams from the Pac-12 coming into the Big Ten. Hopefully they kind of get rid of these divisions. Every conference should be the best two teams from that conference should play in the conference championship. So in this case, for the Big Ten, yes, it means you would see Michigan, Ohio State play in back-to-back weeks. So be it. So be it. When your conference gets so big, you've got to be able to figure out, okay, who's going to be the best teams. And sometimes we've seen that. The Big 12 was doing that. The two best teams play in the championship, where that sometimes meant that a team that already played the tail end of the season plays again in the championship game. Damien said, I get it, but if the man is good at winning games, especially in college football, like Urban Meyer with his teams, coach, why not hire him if you know he's going to win you games, get to the playoffs? From that standpoint, I understand what you're saying, but that's a two-way street, because that means that Urban Meyer would be choosing to go to Nebraska. He's not going to Nebraska. He would not go anywhere less than a Bama, Texas, maybe, like those big name power. I'm not saying he would, but I'm just saying, like, that's the type of brand that Urban Meyer would go. He would go to a school that would be really good about covering up what he does wrong. Bama's a great example. Look at a lot of the recruiting violations that have come out after Urban Meyer left. Look at the state of the programs that he left behind him, i.e. Florida. Look at the state of the way those programs. Yeah. And this is kind of what I'm alluding to, is that he was forced out of Florida for alleged stuff that he was doing, but he said he wanted to spend time with his family. And then a year later, he goes to coach Ohio State. And then he leaves Ohio State to go to the NFL. And you saw how badly that went for him. Basically, you don't have programs that are willing to cover up for you anymore at the NFL level. So it's not, and that's what we're saying, Damien. That's what I'm saying, is that yes, you have to take the on the field product into account, but you also have to take the off the field culture into account. Is Nebraska willing to sacrifice that? I don't know. I would think they probably would. But I don't think Urban Meyer's going to be lining up. Like, he's got a really cushy gig with Fox. He's got a real cushy gig with Fox. I don't think he's going to be sacrificing that unless it's a really good opportunity that he feels is worth his time. So we hear him a lot. We hear him a lot being brought up of jobs around the country. I don't think he's going anywhere. I guess the last coach, it's not really a school, but it's more of the coach. I've seen a lot recently that Deion Sanders and what he's done at Jackson State in their first undefeated season in school history. There's a lot of conversation that he might jump to. Jon Gruden's not going to college. Nope. Jon Gruden's probably not getting a coaching job again, ever. Ever. I think you see this problem is that when you see college coaches jump to the NFL without having previous coordinator experience, like Matt Rule, like Nick Saban, when you see guys like that jump to the NFL, there's a big mindset difference. There's a big culture difference. Same thing goes the other way. If you get guys like a Jon Gruden who's coaching the NFL, hasn't really coached in college, that doesn't bode well either. It doesn't really work. Look at Herm Edwards and how he ran his program. He essentially ran out of Arizona State, not even a top tier program. I think athletic directors are smarter than that. They've kind of learned college, stick to college, NFL, stick to NFL. So Jon Gruden's not going to get another head coaching job. Not anywhere. Not anytime soon. Maybe down the road in the NFL, maybe, but I highly doubt it because there's likely going to be some blackballing going on because of what happened. Allegedly. But the last one I want to touch on is Deion Sanders. From what I've seen, I don't know how many reports there are out there, but I've seen he's been kind of linked to Colorado, South Florida. But I think that's a name that could be very intriguing. Is Deion Sanders. You see that what he's been able to do at a smaller school like Jackson State. And I think that success is going to springboard him. If I were him, don't go to a big like Colorado type program. Go to a school that's got possibility, like a Group of 5 type school. Because you can still manage expectations, and with as big of a name as he is, he can help get bigger name recruits to come into that school. I think that's the next logical step for him. If he chooses, he might choose to just stay at Jackson State and help build up, that school, the name around that school, the conference that they're in. I think he's really good. He's really good for Jackson State. He's really good for the HBCUs. And I think it'd be a good logical next step to move up to a Group of 5, but I don't see him moving up to a Power 5 that drastic of a jump. It's possible, because if you get a team that's really, really desperate to make a big splash, like a Colorado. Yeah. We're on the same page here. As per usual, we're on the same page here. I don't really think a Power 5 program's in his best interest. Group of 5, I would love to see. And his sons would just transfer. I don't think it's a big low blow. It's part of the business. It's part of the business. When you get success at a school like a Jackson State, or even use like a Division 1 AA school like say App State, right? When you have success there, the only logical next step is to go and take on a bigger challenge. Now you got to make sure that's incremental and try not to bite off more than you can chew. But I would venture to see him, Dion, go to I know the one school that I keep seeing a lot of is South Florida, and I think that's a healthy enough jump. I could see him going to a team in Conference USA, maybe American Athletic like South Florida, Sun Belt. Try to stay in the area, that the region of the country that he's in. Yeah, I think some of those other names would be good fits. Liberty, Coastal Carolina, SMU, Houston. But the one name that pops out a lot right now is South Florida. And I think that would be a good fit because South Florida, they've never really had a ton of success. And, 1-10 this year in the American, but you've got other teams right now as it sits. You got other teams that have made playoff run conversations. UCF, Cincinnati, Houston's had some success. SMU, some of the teams that Devin was just listing. You've got also those teams that have had success in that conference on the national stage. So I think if you make the good happy medium is if you don't go to a Sun Belt school or a Conference USA school. American Athletic is a good middle ground. It's kind of like the best of Group of Five, but it's not all the way to a Power Five. You get some schools that now have some budgets that you're working with versus smaller schools. Like you'll never see Dion in the MAC. Dion to Illinois would be sweet. I think that'd be an interesting pipe dream. You can always wish for that, I think. But that's kind of the comment that we've been saying is I think a jump to a Power 5 school, that is too big of a jump for Deion Sanders right now. And not that he can't do it. It's as you make these steps, the level of expectation also rises. So when you get to an Illinois, who right now is having a great season comparatively to the rest of their recent history, if you hire a Deion Sanders at an Illinois, now Illinois is going to be all over. They're going to be all over in the conversation for competing for the Big Ten West, and Deion wouldn't even have coached a game yet. So now you're talking about Illinois being one of the top teams in the Big Ten West, and he hasn't even recruited guys yet, hasn't brought in assistants. You see what I'm saying, Damian? Like there's levels to it. And if you jump to a Power 5 school like that, your level of expectation astronomically rises. So take that next logical step, go to a Group of 5 school. And if you have success there, then you can go, then that opens the door to a ton of Power 5 schools. You might not get good ones, but if you have enough sustained success, look at somebody like Josh Heupel, for example. Look at somebody like Josh Heupel, for example. He got his job with UCF. He had some success. Didn't have the level of success they expected because of what UCF had done under Scott Frost. But that opened the door for him to go to Tennessee and now have a phenomenal year for Tennessee. I know they're disappointed that they're not going to be in the college football playoff, but it's still a phenomenal year nonetheless. When's the last time they had 9 wins, 10 wins in a season? It's been a long time.
So if you're Deion, that's what you do. You go to a school that you can manage the expectations. So I think that's going to be a really interesting scenario. If Deion makes this jump, this would be earth-shattering news in the world of college football. Earth-shattering news in the world of college football. If he were to go to a Texas. Now the other name that got thrown out for Deion was to coach at Florida State. Give it some time. If Florida State starts going backwards and Deion continues to have his success, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. But I think that's one of the only power schools he might jump to if he doesn't go Group of 5 first. But that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Florida State's they're having a decent year, 8-3, all 3 losses in conference play. But what do you do? You had a big win against LSU beginning of the season. But this is where we're starting to see now in college football. You're starting to see that coaching tree, the coaching carousel take shape. So there's some other potential big jobs out there, but of those schools, that's going to be the biggest one right now is the Lane Kiffin conversation we just had a few minutes ago. So, all right. But that's going to do it for us today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching. Check us out on social media. You can find all the great shows that we have throughout the network. You can find later on today, you got Afternoon Blitz, Easy Money, Jags Nation a couple times a week, Horseshoe Talk 2 times a week, Red Kingdom twice a week. All those we've got different shows catered around different programs, different NFL teams. You've got also a bunch of different new shows that are coming out here on the All Sports All Plays Network. So if you want to find all that, or find your favorite show's content, or find some great shows that you didn't even know you knew about yet, follow us on social media. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter. Find us YouTube, search ASAP Sports Network, Facebook at All Sports All Plays, Twitter at ASAP Network 1, and Twitch at ASAP Network. Hit the like, hit the share, hit the subscribe button, and of course, comment during the show. We can hear your takes about the latest going on in sports news. And with that, today's our Friday. Take an extended weekend. We won't be back until Monday, most likely. Likely it'll be myself, Ray, maybe. His schedule kind of has really been changing. But yes, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope you have a safe Thanksgiving, a happy Thanksgiving. Spend some time with your family, your loved ones. Spend some time with some people and enjoy some football. 3 games of NFL action tomorrow. Plenty more in the world of sports. There's a bunch of other stuff that didn't even get to yet. We got NBA action, NHL action. Lots of fun stuff this weekend. Tonight the Red Wings and Pistons are in action. Michigan basketball's in action. Kansas in the top 25 in college basketball's in action. The Maui Invitational Championship, number 10 Creighton against number 14 Arizona. Consolation game, you got Arkansas and San Diego State. A top, number 9, number 17. Big slate of NBA action tonight. And a big slate of NHL action. Plenty of games going on tonight. So enjoy all that. We will see you back Monday morning on ASAP in the morning here on the All Sports All Plays Network, 10 a.m. Eastern. Have a great and safe and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
All Sports All Plays. All Sports All Plays. All Sports All Plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All Sports All Plays.